I'm Preethi Kasireddy. I'm a UI UX engineer at my own company, Sapien.ai. I have a backstory where I moved into engineering 2 years ago and I've fallen in love with it, and I've been very involved in the React community, and so yeah.
How did you get started in engineering?
So I used to work at Andreessen Horowitz. I was the partner there, and then I just had this urge to learn to code, and after many months of trying, something hit, and I fell in love with just programming and JavaScript in general, and that's how I got started with learning to code. And then I just kept learning on my own and spending my nights and weekends doing it, and just fell in love with it.
That's exciting. It's very similar to my story. I was in the middle of selling the company and I got bored. I took 3 weeks off, and those 3 weeks were HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then ever since then, it's just been
interesting. Yeah, I remember it was a Friday and I just didn't show up to work, and I was like, I'm just going to do JavaScript all day.
Yeah.
And that was the first day I literally fell in love with JavaScript, and then couldn't stop.
So interesting. It is interesting, and for me it was about 2 years ago too.
Huh,
so
interesting.
It's really funny.
And what makes, I think particularly JavaScript is really good for newbies and beginners because of the immediate feedback loop.
Immediate feedback is so important.
Yeah, because I tried Python for many, many months, and something just didn't stick, and I just kept losing the habit, and I would try my best, but it was just I just didn't see the effects of it, and the being able to refresh your browser and see what you're doing right then and there just makes a huge difference.
Right. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. It wasn't until I remember taking a programming class 10 or 15 years ago and thinking this is the most terrifying thing ever, and it wasn't until I was able to just have my server reload automatically that I was like, oh, this is really amazing. I can actually do code, and I can be passionate about it.
Yeah.
So you've been doing a lot of work with just sort of looking at MobX and Redux. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So when I learned React, I learned with Redux because I think a lot of the community examples out there use Redux. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people are familiar with Redux already. But then at work at Coinbase, when I used to work there, we ended up choosing MobX for our React implementation. And so that was my first introduction to MobX. And it was very interesting because Redux and MobX are both help you manage your state on your front end. So they manage your state external to your components. But they do it in very interesting and opposing ways. For example, one is immutable, one is not. One uses observable data, one uses plain data. One uses actions, one doesn't. And it almost felt like they were two opposite paradigms, but they both work really well for the front end. And so that's when I became interested in kind of understanding how to dissect these both models and figure out which one is better in which use cases. Mm-hmm. And
what's some advice that you have for somebody going through that battle?
So I think with Redux, obviously, it kind of derived from the flux architecture. One-way data flow, predictable data flow, everything happens in a certain way. And so that predictability gives you a lot of maintainability and scalability for a code base over time. So I would say, personally, again, this is my opinion, and I think it can differ across different people, but I would pick Redux when I'm building a more complex application that requires this kind of predictability, this one-way data flow. You have a large team that needs to be able to hop into a code base and understand how things are working. Whereas MobX, it has a lot of magic built into it because it uses observable data underneath to store your state. And so it has implicit, it automatically updates your components once your data updates. There's just a lot of abstractions that it hides. And so I think it becomes easier when you're building more simpler applications, smaller teams, and you don't really care about the whole predictability, maintainability as much. And the other thing is, with MobX, you're thinking about state in terms of reacting to state changes. So I think it's great for building presentation software or text editors or dashboards or real-time data stuff. Whereas with Redux, you're thinking about your state as reacting to actions. And so an action can can manipulate multiple parts of state, and that's when Redux becomes a lot easier because you can just fire off an action and your reducers can handle that complex reaction by having multiple reducers react to that reaction.
You've been pretty active in the React community, and you've only been doing this for 2 years now. What has getting into the React community been like?
It's a good question. It's been super welcoming, actually, and I really, really appreciate it. Because as someone who's brand new and who just fell in love with coding, I was a little bit I remember my first talk was at React Europe. I just gave a lightning talk, and I was just so shocked at how accepting and they were just oh, you did such a great job, good job. And I was I've been only programming for 8 months, and you're able to just let that go and just appreciate me for my skills or my talent or what I'm talking about. And I've never everyone I continue to meet is just super nice, super smart, and I'm so glad that I'm part of this community. And honestly, this is why I continue to be part of the JavaScript community, because I think the React community is a big part of what makes the JavaScript community what it is today. And I really like being part of the React community and the JavaScript community in general.
Is there anything the React community can do better?
Maybe this is tough to do, but maybe one thing is kind of talk about their learnings, or I guess maybe I'm talking more about the Facebook open source React community, but it'd be interesting to hear their perspective on how their experience in open source has been, what they've learned, lessons for the open source community, what they can share for us, because I think now that React is becoming so big and important on the front end, they have a lot of influence over a lot of JavaScript developers, and a lot of they just know a lot about open source, and they're so involved in it that I think they can distill some lessons for us about what they think are important for open source and sustainable open source.
Where can we find you on the internet?
Twitter, IAM_Preethi is my handle. And yeah, that's probably the best, or my Medium blog.
Thank you.
Hey there. Are you into reactive programming using JavaScript? Do you have to deal with asynchrony in your web app? Then join this instructor Ben Lesh to learn all of the ins and outs of RxJS in his hands-on workshop. Available online and in person, go to rxworkshop.com for more details and to book your spot today.